Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our daily word. I'm glad you could join me for our time together this morning. We are at the end of this Holy Week. The shadows of Lent have finally gone all the way, and we gather this morning on what we call Good Friday. It is the crucifixion of Jesus that we talk about, think about, commemorate this day. Forever, a long time, we always in our community celebrated worship together and shared in the seven last words from noon to 3. And I preached many times at those services, often to a very empty church. But we shared in those seven last words always, all those years. And so today is Good Friday. It's daily word number 705. So I'm glad you could join me again this morning. So I'm going to share the scripture this morning. It's the very last words that I shared last night at worship before I blew out the Christ candle and we exited the sanctuary. And it's from the Gospel of John, chapter 19, verses 28 through 30. When Jesus knew that all was now finished, he said, in order to fulfill scripture, I am thirsty. When Jesus had received the wine, he said, it is finished. Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. I always find myself pretty emotional at the end of our Monday, Thursday worship reading that. It's, I suppose it brings up lots of emotions about who we are and where God finds us in the midst of our story. We sang last night, Were You There, at the end, but I often think of the song, When I Survey the Wondrous Cross, on whence the Prince of Glory died. My richest gain I count but loss, and pour contempt on all of my pride. I often wonder, um, you know, if we get so ahead of ourselves and so caught up in all the hurry and rush of the day, and now we're headed to Easter, that we sometimes forget that we are called to pause a moment to think about this day. I read earlier today that there's a small museum in the town of Assisi, and there in that museum hangs a crucifix. And this crucifix was actually made in 1236. And that crucifix is famous for being the very first crucifix in Western Christianity to show Christ suffering on the cross. In 1236, if you can possibly imagine that, 800 years ago. No, yeah, 800 years ago, I'm sorry. It's an incredible thing that we think about. And I'm not sure my math is right, but either way, it's it's old. Um, we are we are caught in this moment of the Christ on the cross and all the players in the story, those who betray, those who yell crucify, the soldiers who are there, Mary and Mary Magdalene, and the darkness covering the earth. And when Jesus dies, the temple cloth is torn in two, and the proclamation of the soldiers at the end saying, surely this must be the Christ. As John tells it, it's kind of Jesus who's in control here. He accepts a drink because that fulfills scripture, but it's Jesus who utters the words, it is finished, and he gave up his spirit. For us, it's this reminder for us that it's God who's ultimately in control. It's a reminder that it's Christ who's above it all. It's a reminder that in this, all that we're vulnerable to, all the displays of human power that happens, and even all the violence in this story, um, there's a reminder for us that it's Jesus in John's depiction of the crucifixion who raises his voice. It is finished. And then he looks forward. It pushes us forward to resurrection. It pushes us to know that Jesus is the triumphant one. And I said last night, that meal in the upper room was a call of forgiveness for the disciples that would plunge them, push them forward. And then today, as we know the story of the disciples as they're caught in all of the denial and all the emotion of the story, that eventually they'll come back to that forgiveness, and they'll receive forgiveness from Jesus even after their denial. And so for us, today is, as John tells it, the day that we look up to the triumphant one, who in all of it, in all of the chaos, and all of the crowd yelling and the jeering and the name calling that's told in other gospels, and all the things that happen, it is for John and for us, I think, an important thing. It's Jesus who has the final word. It is finished. Today we looked up into the eyes of the triumphant one. And that's good news for us. And I think that's a reminder of how God works in us as well, through the triumphant one. And so I pray that we'll take a moment or two today just to think about this day and what it means, and how God has worked through the triumphant one and then through us. And this reminder that now we're pushed forward again, to waiting a bit on Saturday, but knowing that Sunday is resurrection day. There's the old thing from Tony Campolo that says, it's Friday, but Sunday's coming. It's Friday, but Sunday's coming. That's the good news of the gospel that's for us today. And so I hope that we'll take hold of it and think about it and realize what it means for us. Think about, again, the gathering around the table and the forgiveness of sins that's important for all of us. And so when we gather again on Sunday morning, at 8 o'clock for breakfast, at 9:30 for Easter egg hunt, at 10:15 for worship, when we gather again, we'll gather as a resurrection people, as an Easter people. And that's such good news for us as we live our lives. So I hope you'll join us Sunday morning for all that's going to take place as we celebrate the resurrection. So thanks for joining me today. As always, thanks for saying good morning and carving out time to be with me whenever that is. I pray that you'll know of the triumphant one in your life and God's love that extends deep inside of us, and my love for you. And I look forward to seeing you Sunday morning at 10:15, and then here again at 10 o'clock on Monday morning.